Chapter 42, Nurturing, April 1984. When the letter to my father was returned to me unopened, any last shred of hope for a better life finally abandoned me. I grew to accept the disappointment, convincing myself that such misfortune was a part of my existence. With the deaths of Moonlight and Mrs. Duong receding into the past, and the tortures I had endured at the hands of the police still fresh on my mind, I focused my attention on leading a normal, less turbulent life. I did my best to block the horrors from my recollection. In 1984, I was 17, Jimmy was 15, and Betty was 9. Our clothes were ragged from years of wear, and no amount of patching or letting out the seams could make them presentable. My mother bought secondhand garments from the thrift shops and altered them by hand to fit us. At school, the way we dressed drew a lot of attention from teachers and students. Their teasing was cruel, though perhaps inevitable. Jimmy and I got into fistfights with other children almost as often as we had lunch. Neither one of us confided the problem to our mother. We knew she had too much stress already. By now, my mother had sold everything that could possibly be sold from our household. One item at a time, we parted with our blankets, the window frames, the marble thresholds, and part of our tin roof that covered the kitchen area. When she ran out of things to sell, my mother went back to the market. This time, with very little capital, all she could do was clean out a small area at the market entrance and sell fish soup by the sidewalk. Her customers were mainly the local housewives who came to the bazaar to shop for groceries. Every day at dawn, my mother woke up before anyone else in the house. In the kitchen, she reboiled the soup broth that she had prepared the night before, fried the fish cakes, steamed the noodles, and arranged lettuce into a container of salad. Once the soup bubbled and the smell of fish penetrated our mosquito net, my mother placed everything inside a glittering black lacquered basket. Into another basket, she loaded clay bowls, chopsticks, spoons, and spices. When the grandfather clock in my aunt's house chimed 6 times, she left the house, lifted the 2 heavy containers on a bamboo rod over her shoulders, and headed to the market. On weekends, when we didn't have school, Jimmy and I would help her haul her burdens. Most days, my mother took my sister along for company. Betty walked slowly behind her, holding the salad bowl in one hand and a broom in the other as they passed through the village and rice paddies. Once they got to the bazaar, my mother set up her business on the ground under an oak tree. Betty sat on the dirty pavement and played with her pillow while my mother prepared to receive her first customer, keeping the pot's temperature up with the extra coal she carried in a tin inside her thin jacket. Around noon, after she had sold her last bowl of soup, my mother closed her little shop and got ready for her next job. While Betty waited under the oak tree, keeping an eye on the baskets, my mother took her broom and swept the sidewalk, moving up and down the street until she had cleaned up the entire market's entrance. The shop owners, whose stores faced the street, paid her a small service charge to keep their path clean. My mother used to tell us that this was how she had swept away the summers and winters of her life. On stormy days, as the wind howled through the trees, it was painful to watch her bending down, her head hidden under a torn conical hat, struggling to keep the trash from being blown across the avenue. She grew thinner. Her skin was brown, leathery from the sun. Her hair turned mostly white, fuzzy, and uncut, covering her head like cotton. The sparkle in her eyes, once so bewitching, had long since given way to a colder, more sullen look. I was lucky enough to have a steady source of income. Through a series of writing contests given by the Communist Board of Education in Nha Trang, I won a scholarship that provided us with 35 pounds of rice and 150 dong a month. It also helped me find a position in the Young Writers Club, a prestigious organization. From then on, instead of going to regular school, I earned my education through attending the club's activities. For a few golden months, I felt relief. Then, during my 11th grade, while the other students prepared for the coming college examinations, the president of my club refused to endorse my college application. As a member of the reactionary class, he advised me I had gone as far as I possibly could with my education. My future options were limited. I could be either a substitute teacher or a private tutor. My training could take me no farther in our society. With my college dream shattered, I was forced to reevaluate my options. No matter how hard I had tried, I could not escape my unfavorable past. The urge to leave Vietnam once again took root in me. However, this time my mother did not have the financial backup or the contact with other boat people to help me escape. And even if she did, I would be too terrified from the last experience to try again. In desperation, I scrawled letters to the United Nations and the U.S. Embassy in Thailand, asking them for help. No replies came back. It was as though my pleas dissolved into thin air the moment they left my fingertips at the post office. Then, one sunny day in April, I received my first correspondence from Bangkok. With shaking hands, I tore the envelope open and inhaled the fresh foreign smell that came from within. The paper was printed on one page of brown recycled paper from the Joint Voluntary Agency, U.S. Embassy Refugee Section, Bangkok, Thailand. Dear Kian Win, you have written to us several times in the past requesting an application to resettle in the United States of America. Based on the information you have provided in your letters, we would like to explain to you the favorable probability of your case. In accordance with the Refugee Act of 1980, the United States of America has signed an agreement with the Vietnamese government relating to Amerasian children that were left behind after the fall of Saigon in 1975. Orderly Departure Program, ODP, provided that anyone who is an offspring of an American father can and will be found eligible for resettlement in the United States. Once you are granted permission to leave Vietnam, which shall be done in an orderly fashion, we will help you find a sponsor in one of the voluntary resettlement agencies. The announcement of this act should be posted in your local county together with the application. For your convenience, we enclose 4 copies of the application with this letter. However, you cannot send the application back to us. The process must be carried out through your local government. Once you receive a laissez-passer, a permission to leave from the authorities, our sponsoring agency will arrange for a sponsor or will itself provide initial resettlement services for you and your family. Your cooperation is appreciated. Sincerely, Richard C. Cook, Deputy JVA Representative, Attachment AS. As I stood on my front stoop in the sultry afternoon, my jaw dropped. My throat tightened, incapable of making a sound. The letter was short, but the information it provided was like an earthquake in my soul. I relived my family's years of hardship, my wretched attempt to escape the country, the many painful paths that I had walked since Paradise Lost. There had not been a moment of happiness since the day I was taught the word half-breed. My fingers ran over the black ink as I thought frantically to myself, who are the people that typed this letter? How do they live? What do they like? They seemed so far away, yet a part of them was here, enclosed in the message that was addressed to me. Thousands of images raced through my mind and coalesced into one big question. How much of this could be true? Despite my past disappointments, I wanted to believe what it said, so much so that I would eat every word until it became one with me. This letter came just in time to give me the strength and encouragement I needed to keep on living. Without this news, I could not imagine what would happen to me. I sat there, my eyes blurred with tears until the sky turned mauve. That night, when my mother came home from work, tired and cranky, I greeted her at the front gate with a cheerful smile. After taking her baskets into the kitchen, I hung up her coat and hat and served her a basin with fresh water so she could wash her face. Jimmy pulled out the only chair left in the house for my grandfather. He sat under the wan light, looking out the window, waiting for the midnight cactus to bloom. When it was time for dinner, I showed my mother the letter, translating as much as I could into Vietnamese. She stared at me with large, frightened eyes, as if the news were too much for her to handle. Jimmy clasped his hands together in excitement. I walked over to the window, joining my grandfather. Outside, the garden sank into an unfathomable darkness. A few steps away from us, the cactus shrub bathed in the dry and cool air, added its aroma to the perfume of the rose bushes. Its white and pointed buds, as delicate as a lady's fingers, reached out toward the light from my room, waiting for the moon to help it blossom. "What do they want us to do next?" my mother asked. "We need to fill out the applications. After that, we take our pictures, get our community leader to sign, and turn everything in. Then we sit back and wait some more." "Do what you must," she muttered. "It sounds too uncertain and complicated to me. Just don't expect too much from this." Pulling me close to him, my grandfather whispered, "Try it, child. What do you have to lose?" The next day, I got up early. It was still dark when I headed for the community hall. After 3 hours of waiting in front of Mr. Kiba's office, I got my applications stamped and signed by his secretary. Next, I proceeded toward the Immigration Center, a tall building located 3 short blocks from the old Wynn Mansion. The salty wind rushed through the busy streets, reminding me that the ocean and its familiar beach were just a short distance away. The Immigration Center was packed with anxious people clutching thick stacks of paper. At first, I thought I had gone to the wrong address and ended up in a busy doctor's office since the construction was of a similar type. At the far end, where a glass panel divided the room, floor-to-ceiling shelves were packed with folders. Some of the files had sat so long forgotten, their edges were brown and dusty. Behind the glass door, a receptionist slouched in her chair, reading a translation of Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. Without losing her place in her book, she handed me a number. Her nose wrinkled indignantly as she told me to take a seat and wait. I looked around the waiting room for an empty chair. There were none left. Most people were settled on the floor, eating their lunches and gazing at each other with nervous fascination. It was a solemn, important day for them all, and the prospect of migrating brought hope to their faces. I went out to the hallway, joining the crowd waiting outside. A man about 30 years old leaned against the wall and lit a cigarette. He cocked his head and examined me with undisguised curiosity. His thin, delicate face and brown eyes seemed European, yet the rest of his features were the same beat-up, ragged, and tired appearance of any other Vietnamese. I stood near the entrance, listening to the numbers that were being called from inside. "Hey," the man said as he waved at me. "What is your status?" "I beg your pardon? Why are you here?" He rephrased his question. "I'm not sure." I stumbled for an answer. "There's a program called ODP, and I just want to get more information about it." "Yeah, I know that program." The man blew a cloud of smoke in an exaggerated way. "It serves the half-breeds. I applied for it 6 months ago. Today I'm just coming to check on my status. I want to know if my file has been sent to Hanoi." Curiosity took hold of me and I asked him, "Was it difficult to apply?"